Hello, and welcome to the Saturday edition of the Victory Road World Cup of Pokemon, sponsored by GG Tour, Elgato, and Metafi, and cast today by myself and Maeve O'Rourke. How are you doing today, Maeve?
I'm good. Our last match was sick. It was, it's one of those matches where it never, even though it feels pretty, one-sided's not the word. It feels commanding from one player. There's still a win con at the end, and so I always love those where it's, it still shows the resilience of a player to sit through and say, all right, there's still a chance I can win. I just have to do these three things and then hope that these three things for the other player go poorly. So it's always interesting to see those games and kind of see how they wrap up, because I know as casters, we are like sitting back here like, please happen, because it's exciting for us to watch. I know it's exciting for the viewer, maybe not as exciting for the player that's dealing with it on the opposite end. However, it is interesting for us to take a look at. However, for our second match of the day, I think we'll be excited to feature a couple of players who we haven't gotten to feature on stream as of yet, but I know that they have had some really nice results this season, so we're happy to kind of send them off as both of these teams are currently out of this group. However, they've had some incredible results, both Clarke for the United Kingdom and Galo Orbea from Ecuador. So Ecuador, we've gotten to feature a couple of times on stream so far this year. Haven't gotten to feature Galo, and we haven't gotten to really feature Jack yet. But, from our little bits of information that we've gotten from behind the scenes, I'm really excited to put both of these players on stream.
Yeah, absolutely. Both players seem like they have phenomenal histories as players, and I'm really excited to see them play each other. Also, like, these two teams are out of contention for this particular tournament, but that's only because they were in this spectacularly strong group. I think they had Italy and Peru both managed to secure their top spots, but that's just it was a tough group to be in, and these teams are both so formidable. And so I think being able to send them off with a really nice match would be a wonderful way to sort of put a close on this particular year and have both teams ready to start and go for a really good performance the next year.
Yeah, the United Kingdom, I know. When I first did the first draft with Yuki, I got a couple of messages of, how dare you put us with these people we played last year. But then, thankfully, I didn't do the second draft, so the second time wasn't my fault with the rematch against Peru. However, let's go and take a look at the scores between these two teams, because it is pretty close, and the United Kingdom has lost 3-5 the other 2 weeks from these other groups, so they have lost in incredibly close sets, and they are hoping to win what is currently an incredibly close set, while Ecuador is currently looking to tie. So, as we see these send-off weeks, you see a lot more interesting teams. I mean, I'm looking at the Arcanine Gastrodon seeking Azolf at the bottom. David Partington, one of our co-casters, ran Mewtwo and Didi, which is a Pokemon that you really don't see too much, but there's still, as well as the creative team building, there is still a lot of really interesting stuff that I know players will kind of save for possibly a point like this in the tournament.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting situation. You never quite know how players will choose to sort of wrap up their tournaments. If they'll use something totally out there and try to get a win with that. If they'll use something that's like unconventional, that they were saving up their sleeve, that's really strong. If they'll use something that's sort of standard and get a bit more practice with it. But it's really nice to be able to see sort of the wide range of things. And I'm curious sort of which route Jack will take, what he thinks will be the strongest game into Ecuador. And then also, it would be such a huge psychological victory for the UK to get a win this last week. It would be a nice sort of way to send things out if Ecuador is able to sort of tie it and say, hey, both of our teams are really strong. We were in a tough group, but we both tied at third. And this was just a tough spot that we were both in.
Yeah, and I mean, you've got to imagine, right, that both of these teams are, both of these teams are probably like, we were so close. Like, it's just, that you're facing now looking into next year's World Cup. You're like, the problem is, we were so close, and we still have to kind of fight through a lot of tough teams to maybe get back up into the group stage, because, they'll be put into those pots again next year. But I think for both of these trainers moving into this match, there's going to be a lot of interesting kind of mind games. I know for those of you that were paying attention between the break, you'll be seeing that there were 2 Shedinjas on either side of the field, which for us as commentators is, I hate to say horrifying, but definitely scary. But looking at these 2 trainers first, for Jack has had an incredible year, and this is, I believe, his this is his first year playing in real life events. 2022 EU Nationals top 64, Leo Regionals top 32, Liverpool Regionals top 32, and competed in the World Cup last year. Already has his Worlds invite for this year as well, so you may be seeing him as this next week progresses. Galo Orbea from Ecuador, Milwaukee Regionals top 32, and competed in the World Cup as well last year. So neither of these trainers are strangers to that top level of play, especially at these real life events in this format of Series 12.
Absolutely. Both players definitely have proved that they're capable in this format. Another thing that isn't shown on this particular achievements wall is that Galo is 5-0 in this tournament right now with 5 different teams. And so really looking to just get that like nice 6-0 every week I played, every week I won, going into that next year and being able to sort of cement himself as one of Ecuador's top players for this tournament. So a couple of stakes sort of on a personal level for Galo, trying to get that undefeated record and playing against just a brilliant player in Jack going into this round.
Yeah, and if you're playing for either one of these players, right, looking at the restricted pairs that Galo has used, he's used 5 different restricted pairs. So if we can take a look at the restricted pair he is using this week, if he is trying to make it a 6th, and he is running the Kyogre Zacian restricted, whereas Jack is running Dialga Kyogre. But both of these teams are a little bit unconventional. The rest of the Pokemon on Jack's team being Rillaboom, Whimsicott, Shedinja, and Weavile, whereas Galo has Incineroar, Galarian, Moltres, Shedinja, and Porygon 2. So you know, on Jack's team, we've got 3 Pokemon that left to hold a Focus Sash, and you can only put Focus Sash onto one of them.
Yeah, definitely a tough game for Galo to sort of figure out which of these 3 Pokemon that I would want to one-shot can I actually one-shot, and which of them do I have to sort of play around this Focus Sash and find sort of another way around that. Absolutely a tough call to make. I think also, for both players, there's sort of just a psychological level of like when you see a Shedinja in team preview, it is so hard not to just zero in on it and be like, okay, how do I make sure I don't just lose to not having any Pokemon that can hit it? What will I do? And so there's sort of this extra game of like these players needing to sort of adapt to that on the fly and figure things out. I think Galo definitely has a lot of options to hit a Shedinja, and it's not as clear that Jack necessarily does. The Rillaboom could Gigantamax and do some damage. The Weavile might have some moves. The Shedinja can, of course, attack the other Shedinja, but those other 3 Pokemon probably don't carry anything they can do to stop the Shedinja, except maybe a Max Hailstorm from Kyogre to change the weather. So definitely a part of this game is sort of Jack trying to figure out how do I address like this 6 Pokemon team that's really strong, but specifically how do I make sure I don't worry too much about the Shedinja, but that I don't sort of let it just win by the fact that it has this wonderful Wonder Guard ability.
Wonderful is a really generous word, Hayden, I will say. Like you said, too, you know, this Rillaboom is an option to deal with that Shedinja, but if the Shedinja is holding Focus Sash, we spoke about this in our break, you're using 2 of your Gigantamax moves to take care of 1 Pokemon, and it could possibly go for something like an ally switch, right? However, Whimsicott Kyogre is going to be the lead for Galo, while Kyogre Incineroar. So for 2 teams that are a little unorthodox, 2 very standard leads here.
So it looks like the screens have switched here, and we've got Galo on the bottom and Jack on the top. Just a jump that we're doing now. We'll go going forwards. Definitely an interesting position for the Whimsicott to sort of be able to set up this offense, but then to have to sort of navigate the fact that you could just fake out and attack into that Whimsicott. So a whole lot of risky plays Jack could do to sort of maintain momentum, but then Galo does have to try to leave this Incineroar in against a Kyogre for it to do anything, which is tough because you don't want to lose that Incineroar, especially if Jack has the Shedinja in the back.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're this Incineroar, right, and you may be looking into this Whimsicott, you could be like, oh, if this isn't the Focus Sash one, then maybe it's carrying Switcheroo Eject Button, and you have to be prepared for that, so getting that Fake Out could be really nice. You could possibly bait for that Eject Button, a couple of different options here, but Galo instead going for a Dynamax Kyogre right out of the gate, trying to put on a lot of big pressure. Unlike Jack, you know, Galo I feel has a pretty free opportunity for Dynamax, whereas if you're Jack and you're prepping maybe for that Shedinja, you may be trying to save your Dynamax for a little bit later in the game, and just to give yourself the best chance of getting as much damage off as possible. But, you know, instead, this Whimsicott using Helping Hand, so going for priority above that Fake Out, so Fake Out wouldn't be able to really do anything to stop it, but no Fake Out this turn. Water Spout into both these Pokemon, knocks the Incineroar out, no damage coming off from that Incineroar, a really nice way to get rid of something that can do damage to your Shedinja on the opposite side of the field. I know we have to keep saying it, but you gotta pay attention. Max Lightning from one Kyogre onto the other does a ton of damage, sets up electric terrain, but importantly, it makes this Kyogre on the opposite side of the field really reluctant to use something like a Water Spout and maybe go for something like Origin Pulse that's less accurate.
Being able to get rid of that Water Spout option is just such a huge deal for Galo's side of the field. And then also just, these Kyogres are trading damage so favorably for Galo. That was a Helping Hand Water Spout. But this Kyogre, as we can see here with the Assault Vest, just taking that incredibly well. That Helping Hand barely helped this poor Kyogre to do damage. Whereas meanwhile, Jack's Kyogre is sitting pretty low on health, and another Max Lightning would definitely take it out. Zacian might be able to finish it off. Definitely Jack coming away from that with the Pokemon lead and still a good chunk of momentum, but it's going to be a challenge to damage this Kyogre and to be able to sort of recover from the damage that you have to take when doing so.
Yeah, Zacian switches in here for that fainted partner Incineroar, and this means that at least at this point, right, you're going to have to be a little bit more cautious moving forward. If you deal with something like another Helping Hand, you know, we saw that Kyogre was faster, so maybe if it's running something like that Choice Specs, or Choice Scarf, I mean, then you may be a little bit more hesitant. The Kyogre may want to switch out, bring in something else, reset its move choice. It's, you know, that's still something that you're kind of fishing for, so you may just be incorrect. It may have just been one Kyogre being faster than the other. But it's still something you kind of have to pay attention to. Maybe Jack kind of tricks you into thinking that he's holding a choiced item, so that then you assume that it may not be carrying something like Protect and you target into it, much like Aaron Trailer did at one of the regionals this year. I remember we all thought that his Kyogre was choiced, and then he revealed Protect like way later in the end of the bracket. So something that's really interesting to kind of have that mind game and trick your opponent. Tailwind from the Whimsicott, though, is going to continue to hide that information, possibly may show if this Kyogre is faster, but it goes for Thunder, so it's not choice. That at least gives a little bit of information there. Does a little bit of damage onto the Kyogre on the opposite side. Zacian goes for a Substitute here, a really nice move because you did not take any damage from that opposing Kyogre, and a Max Hailstorm from the Kyogre on Galo's side into this Whimsicott is going to do a ton of damage and brings it down to a Focus Sash, which will get removed from the Hail. So a really nice piece of information to know moving forward, that is where the Focus Sash is on Jack's team.
Yeah, so wonderful to confirm the Focus Sash, and then this Kyogre is just managing to do so much. It drew the attention of Jack's Kyogre so that this Zacian was able to get up a Substitute, even though it seemed really threatened by that opposing Kyogre. Kyogre could have just gone for an Origin Pulse and done a ton of damage, but you have to worry about that Kyogre and you have to consider going for a Thunder, and suddenly this Kyogre is just, on Galo's side, is just has such a commanding view of the field. It's done a ton of damage to the opposing Kyogre, it's gotten that KO on Whimsicott, and it's really interesting to see sort of this Assault Vest Kyogre. Last game we watched an Assault Vest Kyogre really struggle to keep pace in the game, but this Assault Vest Kyogre is taking damage left and right, setting up momentum for its partners, and doing a ton of damage too, and we'll have to see if that Dialga coming in is going to be able to flip things around.
Yeah, and Dialga may be the right Pokemon that you want to go for with a Dynamax of your own. Get your own Dynamax up much later and allow for you to maybe get big damage off after taking some big damage. You may already, you know, your Kyogre's probably not going to stick around on the field for too long, so you may just have to try and get as much damage out with the Kyogre if you're Jack to just to try and make a little bit more of an impact so that your Dialga has a much better time trying to sweep up some of this damage. You know, this Zacian's going to be a little bit more pesky to deal with because it can sit behind a sub, especially if you're trying to put some Dynamax turns into that Substitute itself, because, you know, you have the Tailwind up, so you have to hope maybe that your Kyogre can go for something to target into that Substitute, take out the Substitute, and then go for something maybe like a Max Quake to that Zacian slot, get it off the field, but then you're still ignoring the giant Kyogre on the opposite side. So, you know, it's tough having that Substitute because you're forced to double target. Origin Pulse, though, is going to hit both of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field. Substitute here is going to fade as well, so that at least now this Zacian is now kind of away from its protection. Max Wormwind, though, is a really nice move here into this Kyogre. Does a nice chunk of damage, but most importantly, going to lower that attack stat of that Zacian, who is able to come in and get that Intrepid Sword boost up.
Yeah, so a wonderful way to sort of make sure that the Zacian can't do too much damage, that Sacred Sword does come out, but you've burned the Substitute so the Zacian is scared later, and that Max Wormwind reduces its attack. Max Lightning will finish off that Kyogre, but probably feels like it's done its job now. It's got a lot of good damage onto that Kyogre, finished off the Incineroar, and broke that Substitute, which is so huge for going into the next few rounds of Tailwind here.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're Jack, right, I don't think you're too hurt by losing your Kyogre in this point, because you could possibly bring in, if you have Rillaboom in the back, which is kind of what I'm expecting, but could be wrong, you're in a really nice position. Actually, it's the Weavile instead, so you still have options like that Fake Out Pressure. You still have possibly a Triple Axle. If it's not that Focus Sash, which we've confirmed it's not, it may be that Wide Lens, so Triple Axle plus Wide Lens to boost its accuracy could do a really good amount of damage onto either of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field, really. And you have the speed on your side, so you could even just go for something like the Triple Axle into the Zacian if that's your move choice, or even the Fake Out on this turn just to kind of deal with just getting rid of one of these Pokemon from doing any more damage to you on your side of the field, and then allow for your Dialga to maybe go for some more, maybe another Max Wormwind to stop this Zacian from really having a lot of strength output here. And I mean, you know, if you're Jack, you've got 2 more Dynamax turns to really make the most of, so You know, I think Galo has to kind of maybe see if he can switch one of his Pokemon out, maybe getting the Zacian off the field and allowing for its attack stat to come back in and get that +1 from the Intrepid Sword, which is what's going to happen here. It's that shiny Galarian Moltres, which is such a cool looking Pokemon. Weavile, though, going for Feint, so trying to predict a Protect from that Zacian to stop its Fake Out. Max Quake, though, into that Moltres, a really great switch. It's not going to do any damage. Origin Pulse does a ton of damage onto both of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field, and Dialga will take a little bit of Hail Chip to bait.
Yeah, so we talked a bit about, or you brought up that Jack has so much momentum these next 2 turns. There's like sort of, or now just 1 turn, but like the remaining time where Dialga has Dynamax, and the remaining time where Tailwind is up. But Galo just finding a brilliant way to sort of get out of that and make sure, I know that right now Zacian is really threatened, and Tailwind is up, but I can pivot in this Moltres, make sure that I save Zacian for when Tailwind is gone, when Dynamax is over. And I think just a brilliant way to read into that Max Quake, to bring in this Moltres. Jack might not have been expecting that as the 4th Pokemon, and now it's got the option to Protect, and maybe you lose that Kyogre, but Tailwind's going to be gone before Zacian hits the field.
Yeah, Triple Axle going into that protected Moltres, and Max Quake going into the Kyogre, at least going to be able to get rid of this Kyogre off the field that has been so frustrating. Going to force that Zacian back out in a way that it cannot leave. Critical hit doesn't really matter here, but you are getting a special defense boost as well. This Moltres, though, I think the fact that Jack seems, the way that he is playing makes it almost seem like he is afraid of this Moltres, right? Like he's got the fear of it maybe getting that Berserk ability up and just trying to get that damage. Tailwind is now gone, which is huge for this Zacian that's going to be able to come back in on this field. Possibly you have to deal with something like 1 more Max Wormwind from the Dialga. You've got a really safe target in that into that Galarian Moltres. But instead, you know, you're at most going to be put at neutral.
Yeah, I think this might have been the end of the Dynamax. I may be wrong. We will see in a moment. But definitely, regardless, like Zacian coming in with that attack boost.
Oh, you're right.
As the threat of the Sacred Sword, and Tailwind going off too. Like all of this momentum Jack had built up carefully throughout the game, suddenly all kind of comes crashing down, and you had to get that Zacian KO sooner, but Galo was able to play and conserve that Zacian in just the right ways. That substitute from ages ago really helping it to stick around to the end here. And now the question of the day for Jack is there any way I can get rid of the Zacian, or is it just going to KO each of my Pokemon consecutively?
Yeah, sorry, you're completely right there on that one turn. But I mean, at this point, right, you have no opportunity for Fake Out because your Weavile is kind of stuck on the field. You're fast, you know, you may be faster than the Zacian, so you may be able to get something off like a Triple Axle and get the knockout. But you're still dealing maybe with something like a Fiery Wrath from the Moltres targeting both of your Pokemon. Triple Axle, though, goes first into the Moltres slot. You hit 1, and you hit 2, and you're trying to hit this 3rd one to get that knockout, but you're able to get it, which is huge, so you're not dealing with that double target damage of that Fiery Wrath, meaning that this Zacian is going to have to target into only one of these Pokemon. Sacred Sword into the Dialga here does get the knockout, but this does mean that this Weavile may be able to get that knockout next turn with something like that Triple Axle. Hail is now over, though, so no more chip damage to kind of give yourself a little bit of a hand.
I will confess I have no idea how much damage Weavile normally does. I'm not super up to date on the calcs, but it seems like it is faster than the Zacian, and so there's definitely this sort of one last opportunity for Jack to turn this game around. If you can hit all the Triple Axles, maybe you need a critical hit on one of them, maybe you don't, but you do have that angle, and I think this is sort of a question that might decide whether Weavile is a good pick in the rest of this game. Can it do enough to the Zacian? And ooh, it is.
No, it's not doing enough.
Not enough.
You were hoping for a crit there, right, if you're Jack, but I mean, it's not an effective move, of course, thanks to that Steel typing on Zacian, and this Behemoth Blade is going to comfortably wrap up the end of this game. So, you know, I think if you're Jack, you may want to kind of leave the Weavile behind. Maybe you bring in something like the Rillaboom, possibly, and then you just try and use your own Kyogre to maybe get rid of the Moltres on the opposite side of the field, because the Moltres could be something that could possibly deal with the Rillaboom a little bit better. But I think now seeing the Weavile just kind of put in that position at the end of the game, you know, you're relying on Triple Axle, which you're holding the wide lens for to get the accuracy, to get those increasingly powerful attacks. But then if you miss one still, then you are kind of put on the back foot, right? Like if you think about Santino's World Championship showcase team where he used that Weavile, you know, I think a couple of his toughest games, and I'm just speaking to him from team building and stuff, some of his toughest games were with that Weavile when the Weavile didn't hit those Triple Axles. So, you know, you're relying on accuracy in the same way that you rely on an Origin Pulse to hit or a Precipice Blades to hit. And it can be pretty frustrating if you get to that end of the game, and that's kind of what ends your run.
It's also tough to see. I think I'm sure that a lot of the thought process for Jack on bringing that Weavile was, okay, I do want to make sure, even if my opponent's unlikely to bring Shedinja, I do want like a chance to be able to beat that if it comes. And so you have to bring Weavile into this matchup where it's really awesome against that Moltres, but not really against a whole lot else on the team. And so we sort of saw it coming in and taking care of the Moltres and being able to threaten that Shedinja, but it means that if Jack brings the same 4 Pokemon the next time, A, you'll have to still be relying on those triple axle hits, but B, you're going to have to find another way around this Zacian, and you're not going to be able to let it get up a substitute like it did this game, last until the end of Tailwind, and then finish things off.
Yeah, and I think, if we think about the Dialga, right, and we talked about how the Dialga itself, how it had the momentum and then kind of lost it, because it went for those max Wormwoods. I almost wonder if you went for something like a max Quake on that turn where you got rid of the substitute, if you would have been in a better position just by getting more damage off. Obviously, the attack drop was really important, just because it allowed for that Zacian to do less damage, but then that Zacian was still kind of able to switch in and out. Dialga and Whimsicott are going to be the lead here for Jack. So again, that Whimsicott coming out, we saw that it's got Helping Hand. Kyogre and Incineroar are once again the lead here. I am interested to see if this Incineroar goes for something possibly that isn't a fake, possibly like a fake out, unless you're seeing something like another Helping Hand. But we didn't get to see it do anything in that last game because it was knocked out on turn 1.
Yeah, Incineroar definitely had a tough time the previous game, but it's nice to see Galo still bringing it around because it seems like it has a little more it's doing here. It can maybe still give us a chance, or give Galo a chance, to stop Whimsicott from going for that Tailwind, even if Whimsicott goes for a Helping Hand, and I was able to do a lot of damage. If you knock out Whimsicott this turn, and there's no Tailwind up, we saw how difficult that can be for Jack. And we're seeing Jack just maybe withdraw the Whimsicott, try to save that option of Tailwind in the future.
Yeah, Weavile coming out here instead of that Whimsicott. A little bit more fake out pressure maybe on that next turn, but Jack is going to go for that Dynamax with that Dialga right out of the gate, instead of opting maybe like in that last game where he Dynamaxed a little bit later, so possibly just trying to put out more offensive pressure early in the game. Dealing with the, not having to really deal with the Incineroar in that last game, I definitely think was helpful and beneficial for Jack, because he didn't have to worry about that sort of running rampant. So you may be worried about dealing that next in this game, but instead, Galo also matching Dynamax for Dynamax with their incredibly strong restricted Pokemon and sending his Kyogre out as well, possibly getting some strong Max Geysers off. You could go for something like a Max Hailstorm into the Dialga. At least just try and do as much damage as you can. And once again, make the most of these Dynamax turns with what is truly an incredibly powerful Pokemon. Max Wormwind, though, the first move out of here into that Incineroar, so it actually does a ton of damage here, even without something like a Helping Hand. Drops the attack stat of that Incineroar as well. So that Incineroar now is sitting far less comfortably than it may have wanted to, and that shows the power of that Life Orb Dialga. Max Hailstorm from the Kyogre, though, targeting into the Weavile on the opposite side. Does not do a whole lot of damage. Definitely would have been much more useful if that was that Whimsicott, and does set the hail here. This Incineroar we saw kind of, if you were peeking at its move, was this Parting Shot, which I think is a really great way to kind of mitigate the damage that this Dialga can do during these Dynamax turns.
Yeah, I think Jack really hoping probably that Max Wormwind would get the KO on Incineroar, and not getting that KO is such a big shift, because now the next 2 turns of this Dialga are a whole lot less threatening because it has a reduced stage of attack. You do still have sort of fake out momentum from Weavile here. You could fake out the Zacian and attack it, or you could feint if it goes for the Protect. But with Dialga having that reduced power, there's just a lot less offensive threat from Jack for the time being. You do save the Whimsicott for a Tailwind later, but in the meantime, there's definitely, it's going to be hard for Jack to figure out what are the ways that I can maintain momentum, given that I didn't take out the Incineroar, my Dialga's doing less damage now, and I really have to worry about this Zacian.
Yeah, I think something that's really interesting, right, is this Zacian. If you go for a Protect in front of this Weavile and it feints you instead of Fake Outs, then you have the opportunity to maybe be hit with a very strong Max Quake from the Dialga. Even after that Parting Shot, it's still not exactly a move that you want to be taking. We got a little sneak peek there as well, and I'm sure people who are watching did as well, that the Shedinja is in the back. So if you are Galo, you have to change the weather before your Shedinja comes in, possibly, so that it doesn't get knocked out by this hail. So you could possibly see something like a Max Geyser this turn, Zacian switching out this turn, bringing that Shedinja in. Something now that I'm sure Jack is maybe a little bit nervous to see, but Throat Chop is the move into this Kyogre. Did not target into that slot. Max Wormwind as well into the Kyogre slot. So at least a nice double target of getting damage down onto the Kyogre. The attack drop, though, not going onto that Zacian, I think is a little bit tougher, because you could have maybe gone for something, if you're Jag, maybe if you had something like Max Max Rockfall, that would have been nice. But Max Geyser here to change this Hail to Rain, most importantly, and gets this big threat of the Weavile off of the field and allows the Shedinja to sit incredibly comfortably for the next several turns.
That might have nearly been a single turn victory of this game, depending on what Jack has in the back. You bring the Shedinja in when you know it's safe, and on the same turn you get rid of the Weavile, and you make sure that the weather's set up properly so that Shedinja won't faint to recoil. We know that Dialga's committed its Dynamax, so unless it has a Max Rockball, there's not a lot of ways Jack has. The Rillaboom can no longer Dynamax to do damage, the Kyogre can no longer Dynamax to set up Hail, unless maybe there's that Shedinja in the back or there's a coverage move. Jack might just not have a way to do damage to this Shedinja anymore, and if so, Galo is in a huge lead for the rest of this game.
Yeah, Whimsicott comes back in here, who we saw so early on in the beginning of the game. So, I mean, you know, it becomes a really funky thing, right? You have Shedinja on the field, you may be able to go for something like a Shadow Sneak into the Whimsicott, and then just get a little bit of chip damage on there, and then get that off of the field with your own Kyogre. You know, it's such a Shedinja being put on the field just makes it such an incredibly difficult mind game. Puts you in a tough 50-50 if you're predicting the ally switch, if you're predicting something like a Poltergeist instead, if that comes out. And then if you're the Shedinja on Galo's side, are you faster than possibly the Shedinja on Jack's side? Because then if you're trying to deal with some speed ties of you know, if Shadow Sneaks, then things can get a little bit tricky as well. Whimsicott, though, comes out this turn. For Jack, we'll be seeing that last Pokemon is Kyogre. So, you know, the Kyogre as well, like you said, it cannot max. Shedinja going for the ally switch here, but it cannot max, so you can't get something like a Max Hailstorm up and change the weather. So, Dialga going for the Max Hailstorm, targets into the Shedinja this turn instead of into the Kyogre, so a great way to get rid of that last output of the max moves. Max Geyser from the Kyogre into the Kyogre on Jack's side to still almost half of its HP thanks to the boost from the rain.
What a wonderful play from Galo to sort of recognize there's maybe one last turn where this Dialga could do something that would really cause a problem for me. And figuring out that there was a Hailstorm from that Dialga, which definitely is a surprise to me. But maybe also covering for some other options, keeping that Kyogre alive. As it turns out, that Shedinja being able to just take that Max Hailstorm and prevent that from setting up the weather, and us seeing all of Jack's Pokemon means that Jack probably doesn't have anything that he can do to be able to finish off with Shedinja, and this might take a while to happen, but presumably the Shedinja is going to be able to just Poltergeist every single Pokemon on Jack's team until they've all fainted, and there's quite possibly nothing Jack is going to be able to do to stop that.
Yeah, I mean, this is this is where Shedinja excels, right? These are the mind games that Shedinja excels in. When you know that you've gotten rid of the biggest threat of Shedinjas on the opposite side of the field, it can just sit on the field and just be so comfortable. It can just kind of do exactly what it wants to do, which is just, I hate to say be annoying, but its favorite thing is to be annoying, right? Whimsicott comes in for the Dialga. Kyogre on Jack's side goes for the Thunder into the Kyogre on Galo's side. And that does a pretty nice chunk of damage, but still not enough to even bring it down to the bottom 25%. But you do get the Paralysis, which is definitely helpful. Shedinja going for the Poltergeist into the Whimsicott. He's going to get attacked by its own Focus Sash this turn. At least at this point, breaking that Focus Sash, so now you can take care of the Whimsicott in the next turn. But Kyogre gets the full Paralysis on Galo's side, which is very frustrating for him, for sure.
Yeah, so Kyogre not able to move. It might not have to for the rest of this game, but still frustrating. And any angle Jack can get to sort of bring himself a little bit more back into this game is definitely possible. Going back to the Shedinja just once more, yeah. I think it's really interesting to see just how Galo chose to play around this particular win condition and how that's playing out now. That you sort of show Jack all the other things that he needs to worry about first, have him really trying to figure out, how do I stop this Zacian? Do I try to predict a protect and go for a bunch of attacks into the other thing? And then bringing in that Shedinja only in Game 2, only when it was least expected, when Jack wasn't conserving his resources quite as cautiously, and then being able to bring it in and catch that Max Hailstorm, everything that Jack had prepared, and now be able to, even if this Kyogre gets fully paralyzed the whole rest of this game, the Shedinja does have a way to do just really safe damage for the rest of the game.
I do like the option of Taunt, though, from this Whimsicott. You're preventing something like an Ally Switch or an Endure. Poltergeist, since the opposing Kyogre is not going to do anything thanks to that Protect. Another, oh my goodness, you might need commentators curse that Kyogre into full paralysis for the rest of the game.
Apologies, Galo, if you're watching this later. I hadn't meant to. I didn't know I had that power. In all seriousness, the Taunt is definitely brilliant. It sort of makes sure that Jack can sort of try to eliminate the other Pokemon, not worry so much about the Ally Switch. There is a way to sort of play to timer here. There's a way to play to just getting a lot of damage and everything else. If you do have some way to do damage with Shedinja, maybe there's a way to play. Definitely interesting to see Jack sort of still feels like he has lots of ways into this game. And with enough luck, he can sort of stop that Kyogre from attacking. Maybe that will let you stop this option too. And the Shedinja can keep doing damage, but only a little bit, and is not able to do that ally switch, which makes things so threatening.
Interesting to see here, the item is actually the Sea Incense on that Kyogre, possibly something that we would have never fully had that confirmation on, instead of holding something like that Mystic Water, without Poltergeist showing us that that was the item on there. Zacian coming in as the last Pokemon. Like you said, I think Jack's biggest option here, right, is to get rid of every other Pokemon but the Shedinja, and maybe try and work towards timer. His Your Time the Your Time for Galo right now is, he's got 5.5 minutes almost left on Your Time. He's been picking his moves incredibly quickly, so you may just have to kind of play down to game timer. Maybe Jack just kind of taking his time, waiting as long as he can to make his move selections, and it becomes, you know, it becomes this really complicated thing of you want to have more Pokemon on your side at the end of the game. So, you know, Kyogre here protecting makes a lot of sense if you can protect and maybe stop any extra damage. Whimsicott once again going for Taunt, but goes into Taunt on the Zacian to stop something like a Substitute or a Protect, which is incredibly smart, I think, moving forward. But Behemoth Blade into the Whimsicott is going to be enough to take that off of the field, thanks to its Focus Sash already being broken by the Poltergeist a couple of turns ago.
Yeah, definitely wonderful for Galo to be able to KO that Whimsicott. There's no refreshing of the taunt later as Shedinja's taunt wears off. And so Shedinja's going to be able to ally switch shortly once more, just now. And definitely Jack's sort of plan to sort of try to keep things slow, make sure this option doesn't get substitute up, make sure that you can win in the end. That's becoming harder every moment. You know that this option can't protect, and that's something. But the Shedinja can ally switch, and so there's still not a way to safely KO this option.
I mean, yeah, I mean, at least you've got Kyogre, which can go for something like a double target if it's carrying Origin Pulse, because its HP is so low. But then you're kind of dealing with the one-on-one of it being Dialga versus Shedinja, and that Shedinja can attack you and take down your HP, whereas you cannot hurt it. So, you know, I think if you're Jack, I think, again, your best option is to try and play towards timer. And actually something really interesting here that I didn't even consider because we forgot about it earlier, you know, the Incineroar coming in as well. So, you know, I think the Incineroar being able to have some fake out pressure is going to be really nice. Getting an Intimidate off as well. But most importantly, more fake out pressure, you can take a knockout this turn, protect your almost full health Zacian later on in the game. Even, you know, if you take something like a Max Quake from this Dialga, then you're in a pretty nice spot. Kyogre once again going for another Protect here, making a lot of sense. Earth Power from the Dialga, sorry, not just at least a nice ground type move. Activating that Shuka Berry just to kind of, just doesn't really matter at this point because Incineroar was at such low HP. But it is at least one extra Pokemon down, so now Jack is dealing with the Zacian and with the Shedinja. And Dialga, of course, anytime it does damage, which it wants to do, it's losing HP thanks to its Life Orb. So a lot of weird kind of mechanic things going on towards this endgame that you have to pay a little bit of attention to.
Something else to bring up. So that Incineroar being able to come in and saving Zacian from that sort of taunt setup, definitely a huge deal for Galo. And I think specifically because, as we look at this Shedinja's move options, it's running out of Poltergeist. And if this Dialga does have pressure, then you aren't able to attack too many more times into that Dialga, except maybe with Shadow Sneak. And so it's possible that maybe Jack has a way to an endgame where there's just not enough damage from the Shedinja that you can sort of just wait for timer to run out. And Shedinja with only one hit point might not be so threatening in terms of the way that tie breaks work. But you do still have to KO that Zacian first, and it's been doing a really good job of staying alive.
And you get the double Protect on the Kyogre, which is absolutely huge. Zacian going for Protect of its own here, maybe trying to not take something like an Earth Power. Shadow Sneak from the Shedinja, though, targets into the Protect on that Kyogre slot, and like you said, anytime there's pressure on the field from this Dialga, you are chipping away at extra points of for the Shedinja. However, you know, Poltergeist, Shadow Sneak, I mean, has 48 PP, so it's not exactly a move that you can stall out incredibly easily.
Yeah, I think the play is maybe if you can last and survive enough Shadow Sneaks and then timer runs out, but it's definitely a thin shred of hope that Jack has, and not particularly much. We do see that Galo is not going for the ally switch here, sort of just forcing Jack to make that read without Shedinja needing to do anything special. Shedinja is still able to go for that Shadow Sneak.
Sacred Sword into the Dialga is enough to get the knockout, but that Shadow Sneak into the Kyogre earlier was not enough to get the knockout here, so there may still be the option if this Origin Pulse is able to get the knockout onto this Zacian, maybe thanks to something like a critical hit. Just because the Zacian was at such high HP here, then you may be in a nice position, but no, I think at this point it's pretty comfortably wrapped up for Galo, because you could go and pretty much, you know, you have the opportunity to Shadow Sneak here and get that last knockout, and then Zacian can just go for a Behemoth Blade, and not even an Origin Pulse is going to be able to knock it out. I think it would be incredibly close. Protect from the Kyogre, though, just trying to stall out another turn here, and maybe stop another Shadow Sneak. Just, again, the closer you get to timer, if you can get some sort of knockout here, you may be in a nice position, but I think at this point, it's running a little too thin.
Yeah, there's 40 plus Shadow Sneak still left. We know that that's enough to KO the Kyogre. It's going to see how many protects it can get, see if it can get a double on stream, but it cannot, and that's going to be the close of the game.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm sure if you're both of these players, right, you're exhausted. You have to be exhausted after this match. Shedinja matches, including Shedinja mirrors, can be incredibly tough to deal with. You know, if you're either one of those trainers, there's so many mind games involved. You know, a lot of credit to both of these players, a huge amount of credit to Galo. Like you said, honestly, what feels like a half hour ago is that one turn was the winning turn of the game. Being able to change the weather and knock out that Weavile and allow your Shedinja to come in. And once that Shedinja just got on field, it didn't have to do anything.
Yeah, especially with that read, like there was this, the match did still flip on a coin with that ally switch catching the Hailstorm. Like Jack had prepared for Shedinja, had an option, but then Galo was able to catch that with the play that he happened to choose. And then like there was sort of like all that momentum at first, and then the ally switch catching things, and then the game was just a very long drawn out end to those two brilliant turns.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really nice play from both of these trainers. We get our little update here as well for that group. That means that they have tied, Ecuador and the United Kingdom have tied. Galo Orbea finishes with a record of 6-0, and he is the first player in the tournament to get to 6-0. So a huge congratulations to him for what is truly a masterful showcase of Pokemon throughout the past 6 weeks. For Group 3, again, both of these teams are eliminated, but a really great way, I think, to kind of send off both of these teams. That means that Italy and Peru are currently playing for seeding in this last week. So they have not reported any games as of yet. Hopefully, maybe by tomorrow, we'll have a couple of games reported and a little bit more of an update for you as to where they are going. And we will be featuring a match tomorrow between Italy and Peru, Asuya versus Gabriel Duran. So if you're able to stick around tomorrow, if you're not on a plane to London, it'd be a great opportunity to watch a match between Italy and Peru, who are both two incredibly strong titans of VGC. So, you know, for now, that is our update for the end of this round. We still have 3 more rounds to go, so please do not go anywhere. We will be back with what is going to be an incredibly exciting and decisive next match for our round 3.